Did you get a haircut?
Yep.
I like it. I think it looks cute. Hello, nobody who is watching us on our stream. It's nice to see none of you again. I don't know what I'm saying. Hello to anybody who is watching this. Welcome. We are doing a session 0.5, which basically means we have gotten to a point in the story where it doesn't feel like it's particularly rewarding or what is the word that I'm looking at? I don't think we feel as engaged in the narrative as we did initially. And I think it is important if you're running a game or if you're playing a game that you not slave away in pursuit of completion on a campaign that you don't love and that doesn't excite you, because we're all here to have fun. And so we are talking about a fun way to move from the very precarious situation that we left our characters in to a story that we actually find juicy, and we're having a conversation about what an engaging and juicy story means now, because it doesn't necessarily look the same to have an engaging story when your characters are very far along in terms of their development and at a different point in their arc, as it does when you first start out. So normalize touching base with your players, I think, is the rant that I'm on. Please ignore what's happening around me. I am doing my best to ignore what's going on in my background. I am moving my house around. I'm redecorating and rearranging stuff. So it looks like shit. Yes, I know. Please don't comment below about how shitty my background looks. I'm well aware of it, and I also know my hair is wet. Thank you. I just wanted to get that out of the way. My name is Neve. I go by Burn Baby Burn at various places on the internet. I am the storyteller for this Vampire the Masquerade campaign. I'd love for all of the players to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their characters and who they play and all of that good stuff. We can go Warren, Jay, and Cal. So take it away.
All right, yeah, I am Warren. In this campaign, I play Dennis O'Hara, a once a kind of vagabond runaway street kid who was now a Nosferatu. Um, is edgelord the right word? I don't, not quite edgelord, but he's definitely moody and pretty emo.
He's quite angsty for a vampire.
He's very angsty.
Dennis is
Yes.
rather angsty, like a lot.
Dennis is very angsty. He is a, like I said, he's a Nosferatu, so he is a literal monster, and so he is kind of struggles with that identity of being a monster, but also trying to kind of like maintain his humanity. So he does do monstery things, and then also will suffer for the sake of like letting other people survive, like humans. And I guess where we are in the story is especially an angsty moment for Dennis, because he has found out that his sickly mother has been murdered by Frankie, and he is trying to chase down Frankie in this flop house to murder her back.
There's a lot of murder going around.
Yeah,
It's what goes around comes around. Yeah, so that is Dennis. He left out that he is also Baby Jane's hood rat boyfriend. Shout out,
also true. Yeah.
Shout out to Mo. They had a blood wedding in season 2. It's very cute.
Yeah, they did.
So yeah, angsty Nosferatu hood rat boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Jay, go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Hey, I am Jay Cunningham. I live and work in the Cincinnati area, in Ohio, in the U.S. Yeah, my character is Gary Tyler. He is a Ventru, kind of new money style Ventru. Owns a car dealership essentially. So he's a car salesman kind of archetype. A little seedy, but I'd say he's got a pretty okay heart generally. I don't know, maybe not. He does also say horrible things when he's frustrated. So yeah, he's just trying to get on. He's just trying he came from a place where he wasn't respected. He left Minneapolis, came to Michigan, and was hoping to have a pretty good start in the Anarchs.
I forgot to announce that we were streaming today. I didn't
Oh,
even
that could be why
post the link.
That could be why we don't have an audience.
Oops. My bad. Cal, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name's Cal and I play Xander Ackley. He is a ministry in clan, but what he is actually is a pet owner, pet seller who, yeah, is a bit of a con artist and has probably caused a lot of people to have dangerous pets that they're not trained to use, and it's probably led to a lot of legal issues. But it's all in good fun, for the god of corruption. Yeah, he is a part of the Anarchs. He's with this little crew, and yeah, he is trying to get to know them more. But really, he is always out to try and learn more secrets, and we're trying. And yeah, that I think that's it for Xander. He likes to turn into a cobra.
He sure does, and that's very endearing. We didn't get to know Xander very much, unfortunately, before we closed out season 2 due to drama amongst the cast, which I will never address unless you ask me, and then I will 100% run my mouth because I have zero chill. So if anybody stumbles across this and wants tea, no, just say it in the comments.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
You'll quickly find out I have an inability to stop the torrent of words that just keeps coming out of my mouth all of the time. So yes, we also have another player whose name is Brian, and he much like Dennis is also a fan favorite, and his cowboy hat is his defining trait. He is a Texas Ranger whose name is Tex, and he is like quintessential cowboy sort of vibe. He's a Banu Hakim, and his accent is real. So we've got authenticity here, which is always a good thing. Okay, so yeah, the kind of I think what one of the things that I want to talk about is what do we want to do with this like narrative dead end that we've violently collided with? Because I don't honestly see an easy or satisfying end to this. I don't even know if we want to retcon what happened to Dennis's mom, because maybe we don't feel that that is a satisfying narrative turn for the character. So let's start there. Let's start with a conversation about what does it look like to move forward into a new story arc in a way that like meets everybody's needs, and like what do we want to see? What do we want that to look like?
Well, so Dennis cut off his family for the most part his human family. I mean, honestly, even before he became a Nosferatu, and then I've, you know, kind of got accidentally reconnected with them um, through I think the cult story that we sort of started at one point. But as far as like this storyline with like Dennis's mom, uh, if we wanted to retcon like Frankie murdering her, that definitely would lower the stakes for Dennis, like in this, you know, get Frankie scenario. Like if she gets away, it's like, okay, well that's a problem for like another day. But like with her killing his mom, like that's, you know, that's like fucking it's the one-armed man from The Fugitive, right? Like I can't let that go. And I mean, he may have to, right? Like that can be a source of like drama for the character to like have to put that on a shelf when Frankie gets away, because there are other more pressing matters to deal with. Um, but yeah, like in the immediate moment, like, you know, pretty fixated. Um, and so if we want angsty drama of like everyone trying to calm Dennis down so that we can move on, then like, you know, we could totally keep it as is, where Frankie killed Dennis's mom, but then gets away or whatever. Um, I will say that like Frankie murdering Dennis's mom kind of, I think it kind of short circuits a other potential dramatic storyline that I thought was kind of coming down the pipe, and that was like him having to deal with like her dying like a painful, because she was dying of like she had cancer or something, yeah, and like that was going to be like a slow thing that he was going to have to grapple with in terms of like, um, you know, because becoming a ghoul could save her, right? Or turning her could save her. And he was going to have to like deal with, you know, that struggle of, you know, preserving her humanity, but also like saving her life, you know? So I don't know. I mean, they're both dramatic storylines, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
So I wanna weigh in here because I actually think that the latter story is probably the one I like better, even if it seems less dynamic, just because I think it's kind of packing the biggest like pathos punch, you know, of the options. And I also think it's an opportunity for genuine character growth and an arc,
Right.
in a way in which the the other narrative plot just doesn't. So I do agree with you, but I know once upon a time we were having a conversation, and my understanding was you were kind of against retconning unless it was pretty serious, just due to the fact like you felt like it it creates at least as many problems as it solves. So I don't know if your perspective has shifted, or if maybe you just feel this is warranted retconning.
I would say that no, my perspective hasn't really shifted. You know, I guess I was just throwing it out there in terms of like, you know, when you threw retcon out as an option, I was like, oh, I can see how like, you know, the retcon, like, you know, would have the benefit of being, of like giving us this other storyline in terms of like with Dennis's mom that we had kind of set up, and then it went a different track, and yeah, I mean it's a good point. Like, you know, the I think the issue with the retcon is that, well, actually, logistically speaking, did this happen in season 2 or 3, or did we end season 2 already?
We ended season 2.
Okay, so this would be
Abruptly.
part of season 3.
Yes.
Okay.
It was all a
but, like,
dream. We could be like, it was
that's what I
all
mean.
a dream.
So like this thing with like Dennis and Frankie's mom, sorry, Frankie and Dennis's mom is part of season 3. Okay. that's a little less egregious than like going back and retconning like like the end of part of another season, I think. Um, but I don't know. You
For any
so yeah,
for any who may
was
be
gonna say,
watching this, Warren and I have wildly divergent views about the utility of retconning. Mama, I will retcon a story to hell if I start to get bored with it. I will just go nuts. I'll rewrite plot points. Whatever works as long as we agree. But Warren is a purist. Damn it, Warren. Once it happens in the story, it's happened. Go ahead, Warren. I just say your
yeah, I was gonna say like it for me it depends. It's like it is I will retcon stuff if it happened like 5 minutes ago and it feels like it was like a misunderstanding of like what the story was, and like, okay, like, yeah, we'll change it, right? And like we'll all get on the same page together. But in terms of like retconning stuff because I just wish it had gone a different way, I don't usually do that. However, I will say, since we are trying to tell a story together, I agree that it is a more interesting story for Dennis, especially since we've done the revenge story before with like him and Gedris. So like he has had the revenge
but
story.
not for the viewers. The viewers didn't get to see the revenge plot line.
Warren, revenge yet.
Warren, they didn't get to see the satisfaction of revenge.
That's fair. That's a fair point. I don't think the viewers have seen him do revenge yet. So I guess it's either or. So that's. I think if we're all okay with retcon, I do think it's a more interesting story to have Dennis's mom still be alive and then do the whole dealing with cancer thing. But how much are we going to retcon? Like, did they even ever go after Frankie, or like? I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Well, Warren and I have said like 95% of the things, so again, per the usual.
All right, I'll take a water break.
Yeah, let's let Jay and Cal have a say as well. How do we feel about retconning the previous storyline? And to Warren's question, how much do we want to retcon? How do we feel about where we left things?
I just didn't know where we're going to take it, right? I don't know. I'm totally fine with retconning it. I think it wasn't necessarily going in engaging places, maybe. So I feel like that's fine. I don't see a problem with it. I'm not a purist by any means.
Yeah, I'm okay with retconning too. I think what happened with the story that we're on at near the end of Stitch and Beer, it started becoming more of a cat and mouse game with Frankie. So I'm totally fine if we want to just retcon that area and try and go from there.
I personally don't see what the whole pursuit of Frankie storyline ultimately does narratively. So my perspective is I obviously, like, I'm not saying we delete every video and scrub the internet of any trace of the storyline, but the storyline was conceived of as fitting the skill set or as providing opportunities for players who have subsequently left the cast to shine. So it was a good sort of compromise, a meet in the middle that made sense given the specific skill sets that we had assembled when the cast as it was together. However, at this juncture, once those players were gone, there wasn't really much utility in that story in terms of actually telling a compelling story. it didn't seem to
Right.
add much to the character's overall narrative. It didn't really contribute to any of the character development. It didn't illuminate anything interesting about the personalities of any of the NPCs. So I don't have a problem with scrapping the whole Frankie storyline if that's what you guys want to do. And to Warren's point, I actually think it makes things simpler to just
Okay.
scrap the whole storyline instead of being like, we went to the house and we didn't find her, and then we immediately stopped bothering to try to
Right.
find her.
Mhm.
So thoughts, feelings, rants.
So if I understand that correctly, we're talking about going back and just kind of scrubbing, kind of going back to the fork where we decided to kill Frankie, right? Like the whole trap and giving her the like trying to like give her the hot dose and everything and getting her to sign over her hotel. So we're kind of rewinding back to a point when Frankie is still part of Team Anarch and we're not trying to take her out. Are we going back that far? Or just to where like the failed hotel thing?
So I guess the question is, and maybe I probably should have said this up front, I actually think there are additional logistical problems that we need to tackle, like what happened to Billy and what happened to Kai.
Right.
If we step back to another moment in the story, I think it might be easier to resolve what happens to Billy and what happens to Kai. So what I was thinking is that when the order comes down to kill Frankie, it's not particularly pressing. And the idea is, instead of hunting her down actively and expending resources to do that, the plan shifts to, okay, when we actually do the siege, we're going to set up Frankie to fail. We could still have Billy clock onto that and then have Billy and Kai die at the motel where Tarsha and the sheriff are. Or maybe they get caught and apprehended by the cam. That gives us an interesting narrative out for those two characters instead of pretending that they never existed. It takes us back to the point where killing Frankie could still have an impact on the character arcs and still be narratively interesting without marrying us to the problematic dead end where we found ourselves. How do we feel about that?
So if I'm understanding it correctly, then the idea then is that we stick with the point where Dagmar decided that Frankie is a problem and has to go. It sounds like we're keeping the part where we set up the ambush at the hotel, but instead of Frankie getting caught in it, Kai and Billy get caught in it. And is that on purpose or is that like an unfortunate accident? Like, did we, because Billy clocked onto the kill Frankie plot, did we set her up to get killed instead of this ambush so she can't warn Frankie?
No, I think we just go with the end of that episode where they arrive at the motel. They see that Tarsha and the sheriff are there. And then the end of that episode, instead of ending with a stalemate in which we talked it down, maybe we don't get there in time and the characters are taken in by the sheriff and Tarsha.
Okay, so Billy and Kai are taken in by the sheriff. Frankie got the warning from Billy and bugged out with like the poison. But in this scenario, we now own Frankie's hotel.
Yes, that is what I'm thinking.
Okay, so Frankie is like in the wind because she got the warning, but she's not a priority. It's just like we'll deal with her when we see her.
Right. Because we can grapple with the consequences of two of our people especially an undercover operative being apprehended, which sets the plan back quite a bit and also provides us with a reason to back off of the aggressive pursuit of that storyline. And maybe if we create a little bit of space between like the new Free State storyline and what like where we are now, I feel like just a break might reinvigorate us. So those are my thoughts. I feel like it solves a couple of problems that we need to address
Yeah.
with Detroit by Night, but I am interested in hearing everybody's thoughts.
Yeah, I think for the retcon too, if we do that, Billy and if they get captured or killed, Xander could be a replacement because I remember because Xander's only been in a few sessions when we were doing that storyline. Um, he joined the team to help them capture Frankie, but now he could, if we go down this route, serve as a replacement to the overall group since they've lost two members technically. If that makes sense.
So how do we feel about just before we talk about anything else, walking the story back? Are we all on board with that plan to retcon? Does that sound like an exciting place to step back to and resolve some of the plot holes?
Yeah, I mean, it
Reasonable.
definitely ending it like retconning to the end of an episode kind of makes it easy in terms of like, we're just gonna kind of divert from where like just pick up at the end of that episode with like a kind of little exposition and that's it, and then now we're here on this new path.
Yeah. It feels less, it seems to avoid some of the things that you have mentioned that you're not particularly in love with about retconning. Since we are rewinding to a save point, basically, we're moving backwards to an earlier save point in the game.
Okay.
Okay.
So it sounds like we're gonna from this point, it's gonna be like Frankie got the warning from Billy and she bugged out from the ambush, taking the hot shot with her, and the can like this consent. It seems like the consensus we're gonna get from Dagmar is just, or the advice we're gonna get from Dagmar is just let that go. Like Frankie's gonna go to ground, and we'll see her when we see her.
Yeah. That is kind of what I'm thinking. And then it gives us time to make Frankie more than a stereotype about the Bruja, to paint the character with a more nuanced brush than she has been painted thus far.
Yeah, it gives us more time to learn more about Frankie.
Yeah, so okay. I feel like we're all on board with that plan. Retconning and stepping a bit back in time narratively to kind of resolve the question of where's Billy? Where's Kai?
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Okay, cool. Another question, or another thing that I want to talk about and put on the table personally. We just kind of have this hodgepodge of characters that are flung together, and it's almost as if the composition of the coterie feels arbitrary. I like Dennis, and I think that Dennis, I guess I understand Dennis, and I understand all of the characters' motives individually. I'm not really clear on why Xander's an anarch, or like what it is he wants to accomplish, or why he's here.
I think we discussed if ages ago now. But it was pretty much he wanted to explore a network, pretty much like a secret trade in Detroit through the Anarchs.
What do we think? I'm interested in Warren and Jay. What do we think about the character dynamics in the coterie and the cohesion of the characters? Do we have any thoughts about that? Because if this is just a question I have, then maybe it's a me thing, you know?
No, you're not wrong. It definitely seems like it doesn't seem like the members of the coterie like have any reason to care about each other other than that, like, they're all here because Dagmar told them to be, is kind of what it kind of sort of feels like. And yeah, I don't think the characters really they haven't really shown much to each other to kind of like for a reason for them to care about each other. Like, I forget, like, Tex's motivation, he's Banu Hakim and he's like obsessed with justice, but I think he's really only there because like even he's only in the Anarchs, right, to like learn from other people. Like that's kind of like one of his not compulsions, but like his ethos is to sort of learn about other tribes, other clans. Is that right?
So I understood his motivation to be a little bit more complex. So I thought that what was going on with Tex is that Tex sees the enforcement of the Camarilla traditions as inherently unjust.
Right.
And so he aligns with the toppling of the Camarilla, and his sire has a relationship, a pre-existing relationship with Dagmar. And so that is why he's sort of been on loan from his sire here. But the idea is that their commitment to the ideals of justice, as they understand that commitment, opposes the Camarilla traditions. At least some of them.
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, but it's still that same thing where it's like we're all just here because, like we work together because Dagmar told us to. And I don't necessarily know that that's like a bad thing, but in the time that like the group's been together, it doesn't seem like it's gotten like past that. Like it's still that way. Like that's what brought us together, and that's all that keeps us together.
I agree. And I gotta say, I hate that like so much. When a party's sole justification is like, the prince told you guys that you're now a coterie, or like the baron has sent all of you on a mission. To me, it does a good job of getting a story started, but at the expense of, I don't want to say logic, but there's something in the ballpark that I want to gesture at. Plausibility.
Well, I think part of it is that, I don't think we've had a lot of those moments where we get to, I guess, get into the characters with each other as characters. Like we've seen, like the crew has been with Dennis, like through some heavy shit for Dennis, right? But like we haven't seen any of, oh gosh, is it Gary? I almost forgot Jay's character's name. We haven't been on a journey to see like what's up with Gary, or we haven't gotten it like very deep with Tex either to kind of like, so like Dennis has been able to kind of like be vulnerable with the other characters and give them a reason to like care about Dennis and bond with him a little bit, but it hasn't gone the other way yet, and I think that's kind of what we're missing. So I think we do need some I think we need a Gary episode where we all get a reason to care about Gary, and like we need a Tex episode where we all get a reason to care about Tex. We need a Xander episode where we get a reason to care about Xander, and then that can be what brings our characters to like care about each other and stay with each other beyond just Dagmar telling us to work together, right?
I agree with that a lot. And I want to tell you one of the stumbling blocks that I've sort of hit upon, because Warren, you and I think, have a pretty similar attitude towards character driven, like GMing.
Right.
But one of the stumbling blocks that I have is that I just don't know about Gary. I don't know what would be a resonant or an impactful storyline for Gary, because I don't feel as confident in my understanding of Gary's backstory or Gary's motives or what Gary cares about in order to create those plots.
Yeah.
Does Gary's car dealership, was that from his mortal life, or did he take that over as a vampire?
Was his current one? It was entirely as a vampire. He did have car dealerships prior to being embraced. Yes, but those are entirely out of his hands now. He kind of left all that behind.
Okay, so
and that goes for Xander too. And I feel like I know Tex a little bit because Tex is also in my Sunday game. But it goes for some of the other characters, and I feel almost as if sometimes those other characters are relegated to the role of supporting cast for Dennis, just because Dennis has a lot more history, and I just know more about what buttons to push. So I just wanted to make it clear, it's not just Jay and Gary. It's kind of an issue of how do we make the characters care about each other, and is it even plausible that these disparate personalities and these disparate concepts would form a coterie? If we're honest with ourselves, does that even make sense for these characters to be involved with each other? So we can start with Jay, and Jay can tell us a little bit more, not just like facts about Gary, but like what would be a cool story for you? What kind of things would you like to see happen for Gary? Let's start there.
I guess in a way I kind of it's hard just because Gary isn't there to make deeper relationships. He's there because he saw a flat organizational structure and thought he'd kind of get in on the ground floor a little bit and make a name for himself. So he doesn't really mean he likes Dennis, but he doesn't really care about Dennis in that way. So, however, I mean, I think interesting stories with Gary would be related to, I mean, he still has a mortal family. He has an ex-wife who he cares about very much. The kind of thing, putting them in danger could be one avenue to kind of get him to be a little more caring.
I want to be clear. I don't think Warren means care about in terms of like affection or fellow feeling. I mean care about in terms of registering as part of his like logic or having like some kind of relationship with this character. That's what I took Warren to be saying.
Yeah, I think, well, I mean, we'll care about in the sense that, like, not that, like, you know, Gary would, you know, give Dennis gifts at, like, holidays and stuff, but, like, more like it can even be, like, you know, coworkers that you, even if you don't necessarily like, you appreciate working with them, right? And like, some kind of, like, connection. And I guess my question was, like, you know, even if Gary's not there to make friends, and he's not there to care about people, he's there for the organizational structure. I was about to ask if Gary was a sociopath, but you said he's got a family and everything that he cares about. And so I think there's even fertile ground there as far as story development for why does Gary keep people at arm's length? Because he is capable of caring about people.
I actually think he has something in common with Dennis. Both of them are family oriented.
Yeah.
So caring about in Dennis's case, both his family of origin and his found family in the Nosferatu is a huge motive for him. So if Gary also cares about his mortal family, that could be an authentic point of connection between him and Dennis. But I also think Warren is suggesting something very interesting, exploring the reasons why Gary is not interested in having these kinds of bonds might be interesting. Why does Gary not want to be friends with his fellow vampires? Does he just not believe that's a thing?
I think he's, to some extent, is kind of scared of them. Also, I think, particularly in Dennis's case, he is not. He does not feel as if he's been given a particularly good reason to really respect Dennis. So, yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot of affection there.
Well, I get the sense, and you let me know if this is accurate for Gary, but like given his motivation of wanting to like get in on the ground floor and move up in this organization, does he see Dennis as competition?
I think
Because Dennis is kind of tight with Dagmar, and
that's
like,
true.
yeah,
I think he sees you as just like very reckless and could have negative consequences for whatever goals they have to achieve.
okay.
So here's something that did not come across to me at all over your tenure as Gary. And that is like Gary has any interest in moving up. Because I haven't really seen you engage in any sort of maneuvering to move up. So what does that look like? If your goal is to exploit the Anarch's lack of a formalized hierarchy in order to amass power, what does that even look like? Because I'm not trying to be mean, but I just honestly did not get that from the way that the character is sort of played. So what does that mean for him? And what kind of maneuvers might he engage in, or schemes might he put forward in order to achieve that end?
That's a really good question. I think that attempting to ingratiate himself to leadership, receive more responsibility. But other than that, I guess, I haven't made firm plans for how he would, try to weasel his way in.
Because maybe ultimately we end up thinking Gary's shitty and Gary's plan is a power grab, and the characters cooperate because they see gain in it for themselves. And maybe that is the takeaway. Maybe what's put on display or what's revealed about Gary is not like anything deep or necessarily emotional, but just how badly morally bankrupt he is. Maybe that's what we want to put on display for Gary. But it would be good to see Gary like pursuing his goals in a way that makes sense. If we want to play a power broker or a power monger, that could be interesting. So like what kind of challenges would you like to see thrown at the character in order for the character to realize their potential? And like what is just engaging for you to play, I guess, is the TLDR question.
I would say it would be interesting for him to lose the respect of leadership and have to regain it, or you try to make a place for himself in the organization, despite not really being into the whole vampire thing.
Okay, so how do you do that? What would that what would that look like, or what are some ideas for what that might look like for you to lose? I mean, because here's the truth, like Dagmar does not respect Gary. I mean,
I can't imagine.
I'm being real with you.
Oh, of
Dagmar does
course, yeah,
not. I think the perspective of the NPC is like, who is this fucking dude who just shows up? Her perspective is, you're just useful right now,
yeah.
and she's just going to kind of take you for all you're worth until you stop giving things, at which point you just become disposable. So does what that mean? Does Gary understand that as being respected?
I think that in Gary's mind, he's respected. But I do understand that from Dagmar's perspective, there wouldn't be respect, not for Gary. Um,
I mean, you're being, I think externally, others see you as being used. Is that true?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think Gary is. Yeah, I would kind of see that, like, just being useful as like an extra pair of, hands and eyes on like whatever situation we're in, but like he hasn't been particularly like effective um at like the things that, and this might just be me like remembering the misses and not the hits. um but yeah, I do, I can yes, I do get the sense that like Gary is just used by the Anarchs and not even necessarily like um not even really like part of the group, in that like he doesn't seem like he cares much about the cause. Like he's there to, earn a paycheck or whatever, right? Like he's there to like, you know, earn some kudos, but like doesn't is not a true believer. And in that sense, yeah, it does seem like he's just being used. He's just there, and as long as he's useful. And then when he's not useful, like what reason is there to keep him around, right?
The
Um,
relationship. Oh, I cut you off. I apologize. I'm sorry.
no, that was pretty much the end of it. And that like, because Gary's motivations are not like necessarily in line with the Anarchs, it seems. Then and I get that Dagmar probably picks up on that. That probably, you know contributes to him not necessarily being respected by her. Um, I don't know. Am I hitting on it? Am I accurate in that? Is Gary's motivations, like, does he even believe in the Anarch cause, or is he just there because Dagmar's powerful?
it's more amenable to him because he had such a bad time of it in the Camarilla. Um,
Okay.
but he's not a true believer. No.
Okay.
Dagmar's secret opinion of Gary is exactly that. Like, this is a loser who couldn't hack it in the Camarilla, who is now
Um,
bounced over to our side because he thinks this is easier. And if he thinks that, well, he's dead ass wrong. But I'm going to ring this chump for everything, for every ounce of usefulness that can be gotten out of him before he learns his lesson and probably ends up dead.
Have
So I think there's a mutual attitude of disrespect. If you think the Anarchs are easier than the Cam, that's not really showing much respect for the Anarchs as a movement. And then Dagmar's like, well, if you think that, I mean, you can even cut it as a fledgling when you're safely protected, ensconced in the tower. So by all means, give me your money, give me cars. But I don't respect you because you kind of failed, and you're treating the Anarch movement, you're treating Dagmar as a consolation prize, which to her is outrageous. And so she's just waiting for an opportunity to kick you in the face, basically.
have
Makes
Gary
sense.
and Dagmar had any meaningful interactions together in the story so far? Like, even if it's like if it's condescending, Dagmar towards Gary, or she's expressing how much she doesn't appreciate Gary. Has there been any moments like that?
I don't think there's been any moment like that where Gary and Dagmar have like had a one-on-one. I mean, they've interacted, but
There
yeah.
was a moment where you presumed to tell Dagmar how to manage her affairs with respect to Dennis. And she
Well, yes, he did say that. Yes.
care for that, for some upstart telling her who goes and who stays and who should be here and who shouldn't. So she made it pretty clear, like, that's not okay. Like, she's the one deciding who goes and who stays, not a 2-bit used car salesman who couldn't hack it in the cam in like Minneapolis or some shit. So I think that's just making it worse.
Oh, so Gary fled his city too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so like his sire is in Minneapolis.
Yes.
Okay. Well, kind of like circling back to like making Gary more like integral to the coterie. I think there's an opportunity for Gary and Dennis to like have ground for mutual respect in terms of like that sense of like family values or importance, right? Like, you know, having Gary's family being in trouble and then Gary having to come to the coterie for help with that, you know, that is something that like Dennis would definitely like relate to. And that is also something I think that Dennis and Gary could bond over. What do you think? Or do you see a world where Gary and Dennis bond?
Certainly don't see anything wrong with that idea. I could see him warming up to you. He's not. I'm not trying to play him as a bad or a mean or like, you know, antisocial person, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I could definitely see that happening.
Yeah, and it would, and honestly, the tension between them makes more sense knowing that Gary wants to advance in the the anarchs, because I think it's pretty obvious. Like, I don't think Dagmar hides the fact that like Dennis is kind of a you know, not a favorite, but like that she's fond of Dennis. I think Dagmar hides that, especially because it drives Owen up the wall. So I mean, it would make sense that like if like, you know, that Gary's like, you know, I'm trying to be Dagmar's right hand, and
Yeah.
this guy's in that spot right now, you know. But yeah, I think the family thing is like something they can bond over, and there could be that tension of like they kind of like respect each other and like each other on that front, but then also there's that tension of like he's got the position I want, you know.
Yeah.
We can hate each other in a vampire game. Like,
Yeah,
that's true. And I do want to be clear: the fact that Dagmar doesn't respect Gary and will use him until he is used up is totally fine. Like, from my player perspective, right? So that is totally, so I'm not worried about that. But I think making a connection with Dennis, irrespective of that, could be good.
I do want to raise a kind of qualm I have with these kinds of storylines. It always seems as if a woman is getting damseled in these storylines.
That's true. Yes.
Where, you know, it's always about rescuing the girl from problems. And there is something very antiquated about that. And I want to accept culpability in my share of this, because I've damseled Jane before in order to motivate Dennis, which is an issue.
I will say, I thought the reason I'd asked about like Gary's like car dealership was because I had this thought of like most of these car dealerships are like passed down like familial, right? Like a heritage, like a fucking kingdom, right? Like a little prince being handed a car dealership and stuff. And so I had this thought of like his car dealership being like in trouble from like a rival car dealership that's like owned by the mob or whatever, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
then like we have to help Gary like save his car dealership from like these other thugs and stuff. And that's like, it's still a damsel situation, but it's not like the lady trope. It's like this time it's his like family, you know, his kingdom is in jeopardy, and he needs help to like fight off the barbarians, you know. That's another kind of storyline that sort of plays with those same values, because like you know, if he's got a mortal family, they presumably benefit from your car dealership, right? Like even if this one is not in Minneapolis, like I presume he still sends his family money, like they get mysterious deposits and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like if I can't maintain this car dealership, then like my family's like, you know, heritage is in trouble. You know, they don't know it, but this is their dealership and they get money from it, and I need to protect it. I don't know. That was a thought I had in terms of like another way that like Gary could like open up or like, you know, get kind of see what's at stake for Gary, you know?
Yeah.
A Gary centric storyline.
Yeah.
All right. We've put Jay in the hot seat for long enough. Jay, as much as we've played together, I don't even have like a clear picture of what you, qua player, really enjoy about the game. Like, I don't know if you like combat, or you like to use your dominate, or you like sneaking around, or like, I guess, what kind of play style resonates best, because you don't really express strong feelings either way about like what you're really into.
I guess I can have the most fun when there are situations where it's like Gary or Zavino is like this as well. Is telling a homeowner that he's going to set their home on fire. I mean, that's just kind of like, that's fun, right? But yeah, I know I like combat. I like talking. I mean, I play social characters a lot, so I mean, being able to talk my way out of things and failing is fun as well.
Okay. Let's talk about Xander. So Jay is not the only one in the hot seat. I know what Cal likes to do, and that is to troll me with the choices that he makes. That's Cal's MO. So one of the issues, and this is kind of, there's a lot of overlap here between all of the other characters, is that you guys come from outside of Detroit. So it's not.
Dennis is local to Detroit.
Yeah, that's why I mean, like Tex, right. Gary, and Xander all come from outside of Detroit. And so that means you don't have any relationship or any connection to the cast of characters that exist in Detroit. And that makes it difficult to set up personal situations for you that speak to your character's like personality. So I'll give you an example. Like Dennis has fought with Cerruti when they were, you know, babies in the Camarilla. Dennis is hood rat boyfriend to baby Jane. Dennis killed the previous prince, Esme. Dennis has a feud with the Tremere because the Tremere know Dennis killed the previous prince, Esme, and they're pissed about it. So because he has a history in the city, there's a lot of angles to work with when it comes to building his city, or to building arcs or hooks for his character that feel personal. But when everybody comes from outside of Detroit, it's difficult to build in really personal story hooks because the character has no history here. They're just sort of floating around, orbiting the events more so than being connected to them. So why Detroit? Xander, why not Chicago or New York or Boston? Why come to Motown to sell exotic pets?
I think way back, this is just off of my memory, but Xander obviously has that adversity with Smiling Jack, that whole feud that basically stopped him from getting influence in different cities. So I thought of the idea that since Dagmar is leading the Anarchs in Detroit and she is well, she's an elder, she's really powerful, um and there's not that many elders left in the World of Darkness now in V5. It would be more appealing to get at like almost like a slice of, not a slice of the cake and like the influence, but more of a network. That's the whole point that he wants to like draw upon is a network. Um, he wants to become engaged with like the community, with basically, you know, with the whole religious angle of the Anarchs. He wants to become the sort of mediator with issues like internally. And so I also had an idea. This was way back when it was it was right when we left off with Dennis, when we found out that Dennis's mum was dead. Um, the idea came that maybe Alexander could have been a method of trying to make Dennis move on in order to come out of that situation stronger. And so his place in the group would be like a mediator, uh, you know, because the whole Setadite thing is about liberation. Uh, so that was like a hook that I thought would have been interesting, but obviously
The
with a
Setite thing is not liberation, or not liberation, it's liberation, right? They have a pretty idiosyncratic understanding of what it means to be liberated. So, like, their whole angle speaks to tempting people into vice, to give in to their baser desires. And in a sense, I think that that's kind of interesting to sell animals while tempting people to yield to their more animalistic urges. But I have not seen you do that, like whisper evil into the ears of your fellow players. I mean, granted, you've only played like 2 sessions as Xander, so there's not a lot of opportunity for you to whisper evil into their ears. But is that something that you want to do? And what is his? Does he even have a connection to the whole ministry ideology regarding like freedom to pursue vice and indulgence? Does he buy that?
yeah, he definitely does buy it. He's more of the Setite that he's doing as like evil, even though like morally it is, but he sees it as like freedom of the mind, freedom of the soul, just trying to release people of these burdens that they hold on to so dearly, in order to better themselves. Uh, so yeah, that was kind of the angle, you know, being that sort of whisperer who tries to help the coterie in a meaningful way and tries his best to do that. But like, because the ministry compulsion is literally to do that, um, it ends up it could lead to avenues where there could be interesting like takes. For one example, like I just gave, trying to get Dennis to move on and not care about his mother's death. Even though we're retconning that, that's just an example. That could have been interesting to explore. I don't know Dennis's humanity, but
That
He's at
go
7.
ahead. that really feeds in nicely to the idea of like religious zealotry and things like that. I think it would make sense if we just saw, you tempting people to transgress, trying to find out what their moral commitments were, and then tempting them to transgress. There is a sense in which this is PvP, though, right? Because what you're doing is you're getting other characters to do a thing that will explicitly lead them to take stains because they're violating their own convictions, which can cause their humanity to drop. So I want to make sure that as a group, we're sort of all on the same page and we're all okay with having that happen. So are we familiar with what the whole ministry shtick is?
No, it's the first I've heard of it.
Do you want to explain it, Cal?
Oh yeah, I don't mind. So basically, the ministry are about corruption. They don't really call it corruption anymore, but that's the whole theme. They call it liberation, and they pretty much want to find out people, kindred or mortals, find out what they care about, what they love, what they hold dear to them, and they will pretty much destroy it. Not in like a bad way, even though it is bad. They do it mostly because it liberates a person from that sort of cage that they place themselves in, and so stronger and more better. And it's kind of like a Darwinist philosophy, even though it's not as the same line as the Sombra. They pretty much want to make you better by destroying these bonds that you have, destroying these and mechanically it's humanity, by destroying your humanity in order to make you more aligned with that whole aspects, because they follow Set, who's the god of corruption, and that's been their way for the whole history. And now in the younger generations, they do it mostly because of compulsion. They don't necessarily believe in Set. But yeah, that's kind of the whole gist of it. Uh, Mechanically, it works that you get stains when they, because there's a lore sheet, it makes you break a conviction. You get a stain, but you also get willpower damage shields, like completely. I think it's like 3 ag per conviction broken. So there is a benefit, but it is still PvP in the sense that you're getting a stain for that.
So is that even an interesting dynamic that we want to have? Do we like that?
I mean, it's an interesting dynamic, but it is contrary to the I guess the goal of like having a coterie that stays together beyond just being told to work together. Because I think once it becomes like apparent that because Dennis is a monster, like part of his thing is like trying to hold on to his humanity, even though like he is finding himself in situations where he has to do monstrous things. And if he kind of like realizes that Xander is trying to like push him to be monstrous, I mean, he could take that as permission and give into it. Um, but that does kind of like, I guess, change his sort of like, storyline a little bit in terms of like the internal struggles that he goes through. And if he decides that like, no, Xander is a problem because he keeps trying to like push me towards this, now instead of like being, a team, it's like you're an antagonist, right? Because it is PvP, like you said. And so I don't know. That's my thought on it.
Can I
It's
make
not necessarily like
a suggestion for Xander? Why not just make him a Ravnos? A Ravnos has the novelty aspect that you seem very drawn to, in that it is a rare clan, particularly after the Week of Nightmares. Their issues don't have any sort of direct PvP element. Ravnos seem like a good fit when it comes to an exotic animal dealer, particularly with chemistry and the ability to create illusions. If you want people to believe their pets have escaped, and their compulsion to take risks makes for a lot of exciting gameplay. What do we think about just making him a Ravnos instead? Because that honestly, to me, makes more sense to be hanging out with Anarchs.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with that. Ravnos are one of my favorite clans. So I think I actually had the thought of a Ravnos before, but I can't remember why I didn't go for it. I changed it to Ministry for some reason. That really makes more sense. That works for me if everyone else is okay with that.
Do we know about the Ravnos and like what their deal is?
Me, no.
Yeah, they can't sleep in the same place. Is that right?
Yeah, they're like a wanderer clan.
Yeah.
They were almost eradicated during the Week of Nightmares. Under fewer than 100 were left of the Ravnos. And so they are a rare clan. Their signature discipline in previous iterations of Vampire was called chemistry, and they now have signature like combo powers that still allow them to craft these illusions. So it still plays with this idea you can keep the same goals, you can keep the same motivation, but it eradicates the PvP angle. Okay. Um, are you reading it, Warren?
I am. I looked up the wiki.
Does that sound cool?
Yeah. I mean,
It's
but
cool to
this
me.
is Xander's character, or Cal's character. But it sounds like he's on board with it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So then, what sorts of storylines would you like to see? And like, is this kind of one of the unifying factors of this group seems to be that they are all outcasts in their own way. The Ravnos are not really welcome anywhere. They're not particularly trusted by other vampires. The Nosferatu are, in their own ways, outcasts everywhere they go. Gary was alienated from the Camarilla due to the fact that he wasn't able to find the success that he wanted. So I feel, and then Tex is an outsider in the sense that he's Banu. So the clan is independent, just like Ravnos. Although Swingin' Cam now. So there is a sense where we're sort of outcasts and there is a necessary element to survival. Is there anything biographical that might hook him into Dennis and Gary that might give them a more organic connection aside from the very vague and general connection of like everybody being outcasts?
Just thinking of the right this moment, I could see, because obviously the Ravnos are endangered and they obviously need to seek refuge um, in a place to survive.
Who was he when he was alive? So, ignoring the change in clan, who was he?
So yeah, when he was alive, he pretty much was still a con artist. He wasn't really a pet owner. He didn't become that when he transitioned, but he was into crime in different cities. He was the city he came from mostly when he was in crime was like San Francisco. Um, so yeah, he was kind of like a petty criminal. He didn't really have too much sway. Um, Only when he became a vampire and following on from the ministry, when he became involved with that whole cult, did he find his purpose. But I feel like that angle can still work for a Ravnos.
So I was looking at the Ravnos, and it says one of their clans was like the Roma. Um, I don't know if that meant like traveler or gypsy, but like him being like a wandering con artist, would he have been? What if like maybe he was like a traveler, right? Like someone who traveled with like family and like cousins and stuff, or like a pod, right? Like a pod of travelers that he like traveled around and conned people with. Is that something that makes sense for him?
The only issue is I know Ravnos and B20 and other editions have a bad rep with the Roma. Basically saying that they're all charlatans and liars. So I don't know if I want to lean into that sort of stereotype.
I think we want to avoid the connection with the Roma just because
Okay.
I feel like it's not our story to tell, and like a white boy playing an exceptionally marginalized character
That's fair.
may not necessarily okay. I won't belabor the point, but
Yeah.
here's my feeling. Why not just make him local? What is the advantage of having him come from out of town? Because I just can easily see Saruti and Esme both just thinking that you're kind of scum, not wanting you around and forcing you out of your home city, forcing you to bounce around various locales of the Midwest. And then why not come back home to Detroit, have this be a kind of homecoming, and then just give him a family or a friend group or rivalries, enemies here? Like, I guess I don't understand the value in making the character's backstory located outside of Detroit, since we don't have like a deep story arc where that seemed to particularly play a role. I do think there's a sense players have, which is that it's easier to launch a new character if the new character has no ties to the city, because you don't have to like think about relationship webs, you don't have to think about who you hate, you don't have to think about who hates you or who you like. But ultimately, I do think it puts the character on the back foot when it comes to getting invested in the story, because conflict drives drama.
Yeah, and like he could be from like he could have left Detroit like before Gary showed up or before Dennis hit the streets and became a vampire. So like we don't have to worry about like any of the locals. We don't have to worry about your backstory like intertwining with any of the locals because they can predate all that. And then maybe you came back because you heard like Esme died, and so like now maybe it's like safe for you to come back. I don't know.
We can even just have the characters know each other. We're literally making it up, right? So the same is true of Gary. Like, this is all pretend. These aren't real people. Like,
Wait, what? No.
I hate to spoil it. We're making it up.
Apparently, I need more. I need more
don't think it's
edibles.
come up.
Oh God.
I was gonna say like I don't think it's come up yet in the, like for the viewers. Like I don't think the viewers know that Gary's from Minnesota, do they?
Right. So it's like, what is there something important about Gary's character that has us locate his point of origin in Minnesota instead of in Detroit? when you can easily be a failed Ventru who is squabbling with the prince and on the outs with her, which caused you to default to the Anarchs, which gives you a built-in rivalry with the Ventru who remained in the camp.
Yeah, I think it was maybe a natural inclination. Like if you have a new character, you're unfamiliar with the setting, make it an outsider. That way, you know, I don't know, it's easier, right? But maybe I think you're right. Probably, you know, narratively, it makes more sense for him to be from Detroit.
Also, I live in Detroit. I'm physically
Yeah.
here. If you want to know about like places to connect your character to, I live here. You could just ask me and I can tell you guys that. But it would make sense if Gary had shady dealings and Dennis knew him, because maybe Dennis as a drug dealer would occasionally drop cars off at like a chop shop that serviced Gary's dealership.
Makes sense.
So there could be a built-in connection there. It does feel really convenient though, if like there's also, you also just happen to become a vampire, you know, and you and your buddy, your drug dealing buddy, were also a vampire. But why couldn't you have met during Dennis's cam days?
That's true. We could have met during Dennis's cam days. I don't think we would have met in like mortal life at all, just because Dennis was like a Detroit, like, you know, downtown street punk, and car dealerships, that's like suburb bougie shit, right?
Oh yeah.
It is kind of suburban, although there are a bunch of shady car dealerships in the city too.
Oh yeah.
That's true.
No, Detroit was perfect. So yeah.
Yeah, it does feel like he could just be from here, and the same is true of Xander. It's always narratively easier, in my opinion, to get characters situated when they have roots to the setting. Ravnos, it does make a certain amount of sense for them to bounce in, so I'll leave that up to you. But for Gary, it just makes sense to have you know Dennis before, you two have done business before, which means you should think about how you would relate to the members of the camp, how you would relate to Saruti, how you would relate to Tarsha and Laz, and the other members of the cam who probably thought that you were kind of a loser.
Probably, yeah. That's kind of like the vibe I was going for, yeah.
So what those relationships would look like, I can copy the character bios over to the VTT. I thought they were already there. But maybe it would make sense to have a conversation about the vampiric history of Detroit, who's here, all of that good stuff.
Yeah.
Who's not. And maybe Xander really is on the run from the cam. So we could just keep Xander as being from parts unknown, bouncing in, getting chased off by the cam, and attempting to ingratiate himself with the Anarchs and hang out. But of course, the storyline is about a religiously zealous strain of Christianity that pops up in Detroit and wants to kill vampires.
But like also led by vampires, right? Like Paul. Is this what we're talking about? That one?
You guys don't know that, but yeah, there are vampires
okay.
are involved in it.
Gotcha.
Well, I thought we did know that Paul was like part of that cult thing, that cult house we like raided, right?
You do know that. You don't know that
Okay.
here because there was no cult element here in
Oh, that was the Sunday game. That wasn't this game.
right. So
Well,
that
then how
hasn't
did
happened
I?
yet here.
I thought that was how Dennis's mom came back into the picture. Was that not how that happened in
That
this
was
game?
the Sunday game. Dennis's mom has not appeared in the Heckhound stream except
To
fridged.
be murdered.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fridged. She got fridged.
Right. Okay. Um. Gotcha. Then I will table that information.
Yeah, so we don't know that. And it's bigger than just Paul. We don't
Right.
understand, or out of game, we don't understand the depth of this. But the themes are things like xenophobia, zealotry, the meaning of freedom, and the importance of like belonging to a movement,
Right.
which are all things that are topical and also have their I don't know, have connections to the anarchs themselves as a movement.
So going back to Cal's story, Cal, what do you think about? Because like when I imagine like Xander having like roots in Detroit and then having like being bounced out by the cam, um, and then coming back when Esme dies, and maybe if he was like accepted by anarchs elsewhere, and then like through the anarch grapevine learned that like the plan is afoot to oust the cam in Detroit, like that seems like a pretty strong motivation for Xander to hang on to, because it's like this is his home, and if like if the camera really ousted, then like he can like really be home without like have like a sense of belonging. And I know that like with Ravnos, you still have to like bounce around and like sleep someplace else every night, but it can still be the same city, right? And like the city can still feel like your home, even if like you bounce around all the time. Yeah. What do you
Hmm.
think about that? Does that make sense, or does that like feel like a character motivation for you?
Yeah, that definitely makes. It goes through that whole theme of trying to like find where you belong in the whole structure, city politics structure. Yeah, that totally works fine. Just trying to brainstorm.
I was just trying to like imagine the stakes for like why it would be important for Xander to like really make this, siege of Detroit or this new free state like why it would really matter to Xander. And I think if like, Detroit was his original home, that like might be a reason.
Yeah, definitely. That I can get on board with that. I think that would be a good idea to go for.
Okay, so I think that we have at least enough of a connection between we have more of a connection than we started off with in the beginning, right? Like Gary and Dennis knew one another in the cam. There's bad blood between them, or maybe animosity, because I can easily imagine Gary having bullied Dennis in the Camarilla,
Sure.
because he's a high clan and Dennis is a low clan.
Yeah.
But then Gary ended up getting treated like a loser too, and is now crawling to the Anarchs in the hopes of being accepted. So I think that animosity would be interesting. It would be interesting character dynamics, if you two can pull it off. Jay, do you think you can like spar with Warren? If there's tension, are you gonna do that?
Yeah, sure. I can do that.
Okay. Especially
I'm
because
capable of
like
that.
you know, and you're right. Like in the Cam, Nosferatu were like a low clan, and then but like here in the Anarchs, like Dennis has higher status than Gary.
Yeah, he
So that would
does.
definitely be like a point of contention between them
Mhm.
if it's like reversed now, like like a reverse dynamic.
Yes. I agree, and I think that is interesting. And then we can have Xander introduced in kind of dramatic fashion, maybe running from the Cam. We'll have to think that through a little bit. And then Tex, I feel like Warren and Brian have a pretty good rapport as players, having played with
Mhm.
one another in the Sunday game and here. So I don't really understand Tex. Well, I kind of understand Tex, but not based solely on my knowledge of Tex in this game. But I do feel like there's enough of a rapport there to have their interactions together like make sense and for them to have a character dynamic with one another. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's already kind of like mutual respect between Dennis and Tex because I think there's been instances where they have kind of had like a shared sense of justice or like what was right, and they've kind of come across those moments together.
Right. So I wanted to talk about the last couple of things that I wanted to talk about before we kind of rock up and really wrap this up pertains to the fact that one of the major plot points that I had wanted was for there to be a vacuum in leadership in the Anarchs, in the sense that Dagmar's not there to give direct orders anymore, or isn't available to give direct orders. And I was thinking of either putting Owen in charge or putting Eamon in charge of the group. So there are also a couple of reasons. It could be that urgent business has called Dagmar away, or it could be that Dagmar has just gotten bored of y'all and has now found some other shiny new thing that has attracted her attention. An alternative plan would be to put one of the characters in charge, which would probably be Dennis or Tex, in charge of running the group as like interim Baron. That has mixed results in practice. But what do we feel about filling this void, this vacuum in leadership?
I think it's a good idea. I think it's definitely like a point of drama and I guess just like story, like narrative drama, right? Especially because you know Dagmar like the style of leadership is that like she is dangerous, right? Like you do what she says because like she you have to, but also she is very um she is like a person that's like you can like believe in as far as like a leader. And then Owen is Owen would be interesting because he like we are so antagonistic with Owen. But it's like, is this a test that we have to follow? We have to deal with Owen's leadership while Dagmar is away because if we don't, when she comes back, like we'll have failed our test or whatever.
Here's the question. Is the game
Yeah.
going to become non-functional if Owen is put in charge? Does the
If Owen's put in
objection
charge?
does the objection to Owen and Dennis's antagonism of Owen means that the group cannot productively move forward because we're constantly at odds with whatever Owen says? So Dennis has that contrarian element to his personality.
Yes, that is true. However, I mean, it would depend on how much Owen wants to push those buttons, which I know Owen would love to push those buttons, but at the same time, does Owen feel or does Owen understand that he will eventually have to answer to Dagmar when she comes back, right? Like if Owen comes back and everything is like everything is fucked because like Owen just wanted to use the opportunity to fuck with Dennis the whole time, then like that's not a good look for Owen in Dagmar's eyes, I'm assuming. And so I guess the question is like how much would Owen lean on this opportunity to, push Dennis's buttons to the point of non-function, right?
So they would feel quite different. The storylines in which Owen is leader would feel, or the approach would feel different from with Eamon as a leader. Another option is an underdog appointment in
Harry.
Baby Jane.
Yeah, I was thinking like either Tex or a more integral NPC. Eamon, we don't see much of him, so it would just kind of feel arbitrary to have Eamon be the Baron. But Baby Jane, I think, would be an interesting choice. And I also think Tex would be an interesting choice. And Dennis too, although honestly, like he's too reactionary. I think it. Yeah,
I agree.
I mean, like, yeah, it would be interesting, but I think things would get fucked.
Yeah, I kind of think the thing is though, I just don't think that Baby Jane I think Baby Jane is interesting. But it would be a story in which Jane is grappling with having this power assigned to her when everybody's angry at her for being appointed the temporary Baron.
Okay.
And attempting, in a sense, it would be as if she has sort of been set up to fail, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Because if she was appointed Baron over Owen and over Eamon and over Gavin, then there would be a sense of where she's just sort of jumping in line. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah. So maybe it should be Owen or Eamon, just to kind of like, keep things simple. Or it being like a mob kind of like, because you explained it before that it's sort of like a mafia style setup. Gavin is her. Wait, which one's her brother?
None of them are her brother. Eamon she has known longer. And so Eamon has a sort of self-righteous quality in that he has his PhD in math and he thinks he is very smart. And he is hyper cautious. So it's quite different from Owen, who is quite willing to throw, like things like ethics or any semblance of moral decency out the window and just do weird things, adopt weird solutions to problems because the boy ain't right. Let's just be honest.
Well, I think Owen is an interesting choice because Owen as Baron kind of sets up this opportunity for like the coterie to have to, like, we're not going to be in charge, but we have to sort of approach things as though we are in charge, in the sense that like if Owen is going to go off the rails, then we're going to have to make decisions about what is and is not best for the Anarchs, right? And kind of have to make that judgment based on like, and like in terms of like deciding whether or not we're going to follow Owen's orders.
I mean, it's
right?
teeing up a coup. That's what it's doing. With this particular assemblage, particularly with Dennis. Dennis has a really strong personality, Warren,
Yeah.
you are also very agentic as a player, so your character's personality is frequently front and center, which is good. That's not a demerit in
Right.
my eyes. So it's teeing up a coup, and then the downstream consequences of that is that Dunnigan will be annoyed when she comes back if Owen is dethroned and she is picked in.
Well, I wasn't picturing it as a coup, but you're right. It might lead down that road. It was more like, when Owen gives orders, or like we have to kind of figure out how to make it fit within the greater vision of like, the anarchs, right? Because knowing this is temporary and knowing what we actually need to get done for the mission, it's kind of like he's in charge, but like we don't necessarily like follow the orders blindly. It's like we kind of figure out a way to make them work towards like that's what I meant is like we sort of have to take ownership of carrying out like Owen's leadership, but still towards Dunnigan's greater goals. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I do agree with you that there's interest in that. So I'll play devil's advocate for Eamon and Gavin. So Eamon and Gavin are both Catholic. Both of them have been with the IRA, and Gavin is a former priest. So if we are doing a story that explores relationships with religion, I think it is interesting to have some characters at the helm or in the story who have some kind of relationship to that topic, if that makes sense. That sort of zealotry.
Sure. That's what I was going to say. It could be like zealotry versus zealotry, right?
Well, like Gavin has survived the Troubles and is very much a staunch Catholic. So there's a lot of religious trauma there. Mm-hmm. Whereas Eamon is more nationalistic as opposed to some sort of Catholic fundamentalist. Yeah. But it tees up these interesting questions. Also, I have a Scottish character named Timothy McCready, who is a long-time NPC and present in my London by Night games. And he is a doctor who rejects the whole origin story, the creation myth of vampires, and instead has set out to physiologically understand the kindred condition using science. When Timmy is present in the story, it gives me an opportunity to be creative, because the canon material for World of Darkness is like, no, it is a curse.
You're breaking up. I'm sorry. Am I?
You're frozen to me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm losing my connection.
Doing just fine.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry about that.
It gives an opportunity to introduce a new way of looking at vampires, rejecting the notion of a clan curse. And then it also plays into the religiosity element, because in a sense, devotion to this idea of clan curses and Cain as the progenitor is taken on faith by kindred at large.
Okay, so then that's like a point for having Gavin as the leader, is that, at some point, so like it sets it up with this cult, right? There's that like the opposing religious kind of zealotry or firm belief, right? And then like, which, as if he's the Baron in charge, and there's this like religious thing that we have to chase down, he would probably, want to put a lot of gas on that. So that'd be like a reason for him to push us in that direction. And then also, whenever this other character comes in, there's that, the potential drama of like him clashing with, like the leadership not being happy that he's out there spouting off all these views.
There's Eamon as Baron, and Eamon is like vanilla daddy. Like he's trying his best to avoid fighting. He doesn't really want a repeat of any religious zealotry.
Eamon
Eamon
sounds boring.
He is.
Already done. Already no no to Eamon.
Wouldn't it be nice to have a boring Baron? Because
yeah.
Eamon is very boring. He's very by the book. He's very he's too cautious about
Sorry, I'm
it.
picturing him. He's like Eamon's like the captain in Lethal Weapon. And he's gonna always be calling like Dennis and the coterie into his office. Like the Baron's gonna be up my ass. I can't believe you did all that.
Yeah, kind of. But Gavin is paired with the coterie. So Gavin is supposed to be the one babysitting you. And the problem with having Gavin babysit you is he is arguably as impetuous and as much trouble as Dennis is. So, not in the same way, but assigning Gavin to the coterie is kind of just like dumping gasoline on a dumpster fire. It's not necessarily helping. But those two have a dynamic where, Eamon is a shamed father of son who can't get it right, basically. And there's a lot of antipathy between those two, which is interesting and fuel for drama. There's the connection, the dad wound between Dennis and Gavin that could provide a point of genuine bonding, a sense of being a failure that maybe Gary could connect to. And it at least seems like there is an opportunity for Gavin to resonate with elements of the player characters.
So we're talking about having Gavin as the Baron in charge?
No, I'm talking about having Gavin assigned hanging out with y'all, reporting back to the Baron, who's Captain Boring.
Okay, so Eamon is the Baron, and then Gavin is like the lieutenant who's, running
the Dennis. Yeah, basically. Yeah. And then we introduce Timothy, who is hyper rationalist and pushes the coterie in a different direction. So there's a push-pull between NPCs, specifically between Timothy and between Gavin. It gives us an opportunity to have interesting conversations, and an opportunity for the characters to grapple with some of their deeper issues. The only problem is my Scottish accent is not good. I have made Cal promise to help me at some point to work on it.
We'll get there.
We'll get there. Yeah. I just frankly admit it's in need of work. It soars wildly from like something that sounds sort of Scottish back to being Irish, and then for some reason he's Cockney. It's just all over the fucking map.
It's a bit of a whiffle, isn't it?
But it's an opportunity to introduce something novel to the story, which I'm excited about. I like novelty. I like characters who have weird thoughts. And also, Timmy raises a lot of important points that if I were the fucking audience, I would want answers to.
Yeah.
Like, why do we fucking believe that Cain is the progenitor of vampires? Is there some fucking reason that we believe that? How do we reconcile that?
That's true. I mean, these are questions that I know Dennis hasn't really like. That's on a shelf. Like he puts that on a shelf. He's like, I got to deal with shit that's in front of me. That's.
Yeah, like do we believe in the Old Testament? Like, what are we doing? Because if the Old Testament's not true, then the origin story of vampires can't be true. Do we really
Right.
believe there's such a place as the land of Nod? A degree of skepticism that I think people would genuinely have if they were plunked into this world.
Do you have to go for your game at 9?
I told them I was going to be a couple minutes late because
Okay.
now that we sort of resolved those issues, I also want to just quickly touch on self-harm
Okay.
and religious trauma. How also depicting real life religious views or views that are a semblance or that bear a close resemblance to real extant religious views. How comfortable are we with these issues? Because I know some people really do have religious trauma, and this may not be super fun if you have that issue.
I'm fine with it. Like I don't have any issues with it, with any of those things. As far as like bringing them up in the game.
Yeah.
I will give a trigger warning at the start of this season to just let everybody know that this season will contain these kinds of things. Jay, Cal, are we okay with those kinds of things?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I mean, self-harm is not too much of an issue. I mean, it's not too graphic, but yeah.
Okay. I am, just to be clear, I am talking about unaliving oneself.
Yeah.
Are we okay with unaliving oneself?
Yes.
In general.
Cal, are you okay with unaliving oneself?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then body horror. Is body horror, what is our level of comfort when it comes to body horror?
For me personally,
I'm okay with it.
yeah. Body horror.
Yeah. Never been an issue.
Okay. I will, like I said, I'll give a trigger warning, but I think we've resolved all of the issues that need resolving. I do want to engage in more pausing when I feel like there's an opportunity for example, Gary to do something or for Xander to do something. I do think I want to have Xander be introduced to the group prior, just because I want to get into the action and I don't really want to spend like a bunch of time introducing Xander. We can work those out in chat though, because I think we've kind of resolved what we needed to resolve and made the decisions that needed to be made. Are there any lingering questions or concerns that we need to address?
No, I think we're good.
Yeah.
All right, so thus concludes session 0.5 of Detroit by Night. We will not be getting started next week because next week is my birthday stream. So, well, I don't know. I guess, Warren, do you want to run a game or are you just doing it because it's my birthday?
I like running games. Yeah.
Okay. So then if you really want to do it, then we'll do a Warren stream next week for my birthday. And then we will crack on with Detroit by Night after that. And we'll play this arc through to the end.
Yeah. I will clarify, though, that if you would like to take your birthday off and just go do Neve stuff all day, that is okay, too. We don't have to do a game.
Well, my birthday is Friday.
Okay.
So I was kind of, the reason why I asked you if you wanted to run was because I thought it would kind of be a birthday present to me to have you run a game. Mostly because
that's true.
you are well
Yeah.
aware of how much goes
Mhm.
into running a game, and it would kind of be
Yeah.
like a night off without us having to take a break from streaming. And I'm like the forever GM. I never really
Yeah.
get to play.
That's true.
I liked playing Pugmire. We could just resume our Pugmire adventure.
Oh, of
I don't.
course.
It just doesn't
Yeah.
seem very scary.
It doesn't, but you know what we could do is we could do like I have some like D&D horror one shots that like I could do. We could do one of those, like a D&D horror
I
thing.
still have my tiefling costume
Oh wow, okay. Yeah.
that we were supposed to do, and then we never did. Damn it!
Yeah, it's unfortunately I haven't been able to find more D&D players. So like we don't
Well,
have D&D players.
well,
Yeah.
Brian will play D&D, and Cal said he will play D&D. I don't know
Okay.
if Jay is into D&D.
I can play D&D. I know the rules, so I can do it.
Okay. Well, that sounds like we have enough then to like get that started at some point.
Yeah.
Um,
I am currently editing the Sirens game to put it up in edited form, so it's not purely a live session. So I will be sending those to you to render, all that good stuff. I think we should sign
Okay.
off now, though.
yeah.
And bye to our audience. Thank you for hanging out with us. I hope, I hope we have modeled ongoing communication amongst a long-standing role-playing troupe and all
Yeah.
of that cool stuff. All right. Good night.
Bye everyone.
Bye.
I have ended the